The accusation hit Beatrice Lawson like a bullet to the chest when Sheriff Morrison slammed his weathered hand on the oak desk and declared her a horse thief in front of half the town of Alpine, Texas, on a scorching July morning in 1878. She stood there in the sheriff's cramped office, her cotton dress clinging to her back from the heat, her dark hair falling loose from its pins, watching as the lawman she had trusted since childhood looked at her with nothing but cold suspicion in his gray eyes. The stolen mare had been found tied behind her boarding house at dawn, and no amount of protesting her innocence seemed to matter when Judge Harlow was already talking about a trial that would surely end with her neck in a noose, or 20 years breaking rocks in a territorial prison. "I did not steal that horse," Beatrice said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "Someone is setting me up, Sheriff. You know me. You have known my family for 15 years. Sheriff Morrison's jaw tightened, the silver star on his vest catching the morning light streaming through the dusty window. "What I know is that Marcus Henley's prize mare was found on your property, Miss Lawson. That is evidence, plain and simple. Evidence that someone planted." Her voice rose now, desperation creeping in. "Why would I steal a horse and tie it directly behind my own home? That makes no sense at all. Thieves are not known for their intelligence," the sheriff replied, though something in his expression wavered for just a moment. The small crowd gathered in the office murmured among themselves. Beatrice recognized most of them. Mrs. Patterson from the general store, 2 ranch hands from the Henley spread, and Vincent Rourke, a cowboy she had seen around town but never properly met. He leaned against the wall near the door, his hat pulled low, but she could feel his eyes on her, studying the scene with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. "I challenge you," Beatrice said suddenly, the words coming out before she had fully formed the thought. "I challenge you to investigate this properly, Sheriff Morrison. Give me 3 days to clear my name. If I cannot prove my innocence by then, I will go to trial without complaint. But if you lock me up now based on nothing but circumstantial evidence, you will be hanging an innocent woman." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "That is not how the law works, Miss Lawson." "Then make it how the law works," she shot back. "You have known me since I was 10 years old. My father helped build the church in this town. My mother taught half the children here to read before she died. Have I ever given you reason to doubt my character?" A long silence filled the room. Sheriff Morrison rubbed his jaw, clearly torn between duty and the memory of the respectable family Beatrice came from. Finally, he sighed. 3 days. But you do not leave Alpine, and you report to this office every evening at sundown. If you miss even one check-in, I will have you arrested immediately." "Thank you," Beatrice breathed, relief flooding through her despite knowing how slim her chances were. As the crowd dispersed and she turned to leave, Vincent Rourke stepped forward, his tall frame blocking her path to the door. Up close, she could see he was probably in his mid-20s, just a few years older than her own 22 years. His face was tanned from long days under the Texas sun, with sharp features that might have been carved from the surrounding desert rock. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a striking blue-green that seemed to see straight through whatever walls a person might build around themselves. "Miss Lawson," he said, his voice low and smooth, "I believe you." She blinked, surprised. "You do not even know me." "I know liars, and you are not one." He glanced toward the sheriff, who was shuffling papers at his desk, then back to her. "I was out near your boarding house last night. I saw someone near your property around midnight moving in the shadows. I did not think much of it at the time, but now it makes sense." Beatrice's heart leaped. "You saw someone? Who?" "Could not make out a face in the dark," Vincent admitted. "But I saw the shape of a man leading a horse toward the back of your building. I was bedding down for the night near the creek, and I heard the hoofbeats. You have to tell the sheriff. Vincent's expression turned cautious. I intend to. But I have learned that testimony from a drifting cowboy does not always carry much weight, especially against the word of a prominent rancher like Marcus Henley. If he wants you blamed for this, my word alone might not be enough. Why would Marcus Henley want to frame me? Beatrice asked, though even as she spoke, a cold realization was beginning to form in her mind. That is what we need to find out, Vincent said. If you will have my help, I will stand as your witness. I will help you clear your name. She studied him carefully, this stranger who was offering to involve himself in her troubles. Why would you do that for someone you do not know? Vincent's mouth quirked in something that was not quite a smile. Let us just say I have seen too many innocent people get railroaded by corrupt systems. If I can help prevent that here, I will. There was a story behind those words. Beatrice could sense it. Pain and perhaps guilt, old wounds that had never quite healed. But she did not have the luxury of being choosy about her allies. All right, Mr. Rourke, I accept your help. Vincent, he corrected. If we are going to be working together, might as well use first names. Beatrice, she replied, and felt something shift in the air between them, a connection forming that she could not quite name. They left the sheriff's office together, stepping out into the brutal heat of a Texas summer morning. Alpine sprawled before them, a town of sun-bleached buildings and dusty streets, surrounded by the stark beauty of the Chihuahuan Desert. The Davis Mountains rose in the distance, providing some relief from the endless flatness that characterized much of West Texas. Where do we start? Beatrice asked, shading her eyes against the glare. With Marcus Henley, Vincent said. If he is behind this, there has to be a reason. What is your connection to him? Beatrice felt her stomach tighten. He has been pressuring me to sell my boarding house for the past 6 months. He wants the land to expand his holdings. I have refused every offer. How much has he offered? Started at a fair price, but each time I refused, he lowered it. The last offer was insulting, barely enough to cover what my father paid for the property 15 years ago. She paused, then added quietly, He told me last week that if I did not sell, I would regret it. Vincent's jaw clenched. That sounds like a threat. I thought he meant he would make life difficult for me in town, maybe convince suppliers not to do business with me. I never imagined he would go this far. They walked down Main Street, past the saloon where piano music drifted out despite the early hour, past the general store and the barber shop, and the small hotel that competed with Beatrice's boarding house for travelers' business. Vincent seemed to be thinking hard, his eyes scanning the street as if looking for answers in the dust and wooden facades. We need proof, he said finally. If Henley paid someone to steal his own horse and plant it at your property, there will be a trail. Someone saw something. Someone knows something. How do we find that person? We start by talking to Henley's ranch hands. Someone always talks, especially if they have been drinking. Vincent glanced at her. I will handle that part. You should focus on establishing your whereabouts last night. The more witnesses you have saying you were nowhere near that horse, the better. Beatrice nodded, though the task felt daunting. She had been alone in her boarding house most of the evening, her only guest having checked out that morning. I was doing laundry until about 9 o'clock. Mrs. Chen from the laundry service came by to pick up the linens around 8. After that, I was alone until I went to bed around 11. That gives someone a window of opportunity, Vincent mused. What about your neighbors? Would any of them have noticed unusual activity? Old Mr. Patterson lives next door, but he is nearly deaf and goes to bed at sunset. The other side is the assayer's office, and it closes at 6. Vincent frowned, clearly seeing the same problem she did. The lack of witnesses made her vulnerable. "All right. I will talk to Henley's men tonight at the saloon. You should speak with Mrs. Chen again, see if she noticed anything unusual when she came by. Even small details might help." They had reached Beatrice's boarding house, a modest two-story structure with a wide porch and peeling white paint. It had been her home for her entire life, the place where her parents had raised her, where her mother had died of fever 3 years ago, where her father had passed just last winter, leaving her alone but determined to keep the family legacy alive. The thought of losing it to Marcus Henley's greed made her blood boil. "Thank you for helping me," Beatrice said softly, turning to face Vincent. "You did not have to do this." "No," he agreed, "but I wanted to." His eyes met hers, and she felt that strange pull again, like standing too close to a flame. "I will come by tomorrow morning. We will compare what we have learned." "Tomorrow morning," she echoed, and watched as he tipped his hat and walked away, his long strides carrying him back toward the center of town. That afternoon, Beatrice threw herself into her investigation with determined energy. She found Mrs. Chen at the laundry service, a small building near the edge of town where Chinese immigrants had built a thriving business despite the prejudice they faced. Mrs. Chen, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and gentle hands, welcomed Beatrice warmly and listened to her story with growing concern. "I remember coming to your house last night," Mrs. Chen said in her accented English. "Around 8 o'clock, like you said. I did not see anything strange, but I heard voices as I was leaving." Beatrice's pulse quickened. "Voices? Where?" "From the alley behind your house. 2 men talking, keeping their voices low. I could not hear words, but one man sounded angry." "Did you see them?" Mrs. Chen shook her head regretfully. "It was getting dark and I was hurrying home. I am sorry, Miss Lawson, I should have paid more attention." "You have been very helpful," Beatrice assured her. "Would you be willing to tell the sheriff what you heard?" "Of course. Your family has always been kind to us. I will help however I can." Encouraged by this small victory, Beatrice spent the rest of the afternoon talking to anyone who might have been near her property the previous night. She learned that Tom Wilson, a young clerk from the bank, had been walking home around 9:30 and had noticed a horse and rider moving quickly down the alley, but he had thought nothing of it at the time. He agreed to speak with the sheriff as well. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson, Beatrice made her way back to the sheriff's office for her required check-in. Sheriff Morrison looked up from his desk with a grunt of acknowledgement. "Still in town, I see." "I gave you my word, Sheriff." Beatrice hesitated, then added, "I have been talking to people today. Mrs. Chen heard 2 men behind my house around 8 o'clock last night. Tom Wilson saw a rider in the alley around 9:30. The sheriff's expression remained neutral. "That does not prove you are innocent, Miss Lawson. It just means there were people moving around town, which happens every night." "It proves I am not the only person who had access to that area," Beatrice countered. "Will you at least talk to them?" "I will do my job," Morrison said gruffly. "You do not need to tell me how to investigate." Beatrice left feeling frustrated but not defeated. She had 2 days left to clear her name, and she was not about to give up. The next morning, Vincent appeared at her door just after sunrise, his hat in his hands and dark circles under his eyes that suggested he had not slept much. Beatrice invited him in and poured coffee from the pot she kept perpetually brewing for her guests. "Learn anything last night?" she asked as they settled at the small table in her kitchen. Vincent took a long drink of coffee before answering. "Plenty. I bought drinks for some of Henley's ranch hands at the saloon. Most of them are loyal to him, would not say a word against their boss. But there was one man, a wrangler named Pete Dockery. He has been with Henley for less than a year, and he does not seem too fond of the man. After enough whiskey, he started talking. What did he say? He said that Henley has been obsessed with acquiring your property for months. Apparently, there is talk of the railroad expanding this way in the next few years, and your boarding house sits right where Henley thinks the new depot will be built. If he owns that land, he stands to make a fortune. Beatrice felt her anger spike. So he is willing to destroy my life over speculation about a railroad. Greed makes men do terrible things, Vincent said quietly. But here is the interesting part. Dockery said that 3 nights ago he overheard Henley talking to someone in the barn. He could not see who, but he heard Henley say something about teaching you a lesson and making sure you had no choice but to sell. That is practically a confession. It is hearsay, Vincent corrected. Unless we can prove Henley actually carried out a plan to frame you, it is just words. But I have been thinking about the logistics. That mare is Henley's prize breeding stock, worth at least $300. He would not risk something happening to her unless he was confident he would get her back quickly and safely. Which means the whole theft was staged, Beatrice said, following his logic. Exactly. He probably had someone he trusts take the mare and tie her at your property, knowing she would be found the next morning. But who would he trust with something like that? They sat in thoughtful silence for a moment, the morning sun streaming through the kitchen window and illuminating the worn floorboards. Beatrice found herself studying Vincent's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. There was something solid about him, dependable. In the short time she had known him, he had shown her more loyalty than people she had known for years. "What brought you to Alpine?" she asked suddenly. Vincent glanced at her, seemingly surprised by the question. "I am a drifter, mostly. I go where the work is." "That is not really an answer." His mouth twitched. "No, I suppose it is not." He set down his coffee cup and leaned back in his chair. "I used to be a lawman, actually, deputy in a small town in New Mexico Territory. I believed in justice, in protecting people, doing things the right way." "What happened?" "The sheriff I worked for was corrupt. He was taking bribes from a local cattle baron, looking the other way while innocent homesteaders were driven off their land. I did not realize what was happening until it was too late. By the time I figured it out, 3 families had lost everything, and 1 man was dead." Vincent's voice had gone flat, emotionless. "I confronted the sheriff, and he told me that was just how the world worked. I turned him in to the territorial marshal and he was arrested. But the damage was already done. I could not undo what had happened to those families." "That was not your fault," Beatrice said softly. "Maybe not. But I wore that badge and I did not see what was right in front of me, so I left. I have been moving from town to town ever since, doing ranch work, odd jobs. I swore I would never stand by again if I saw injustice happening." Understanding dawned in Beatrice's eyes. "That is why you are helping me." "Partly," Vincent admitted. His gaze met hers, and the intensity there made her breath catch. "But if I am being honest, there is more to it than that. From the moment I saw you standing in that sheriff's office, refusing to back down even when everything was against you, I knew you were someone worth fighting for." The air between them suddenly felt charged, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Beatrice's heart was beating faster and she could not seem to look away from his eyes. "Vincent!" A sharp knock at the front door shattered the moment. Beatrice jumped up, her cheeks flushing as she went to answer it. Sheriff Morrison stood on her porch, his expression grave. "Miss Lawson, I need you to come with me." Fear spiked through her. "Why? What happened?" "Marcus Henley is at my office. He is pushing hard for your immediate arrest. Says he has new evidence that you have been planning to steal horses for weeks." The sheriff's tone was skeptical but wary. "I am trying to hold him off, but I need you to answer some questions." Vincent appeared behind Beatrice. "I am coming with her, Sheriff." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "This does not concern you, Rourke." "It does if I am a witness," Vincent replied evenly. "I have information about what happened the night that mare was stolen." The sheriff looked between them, then nodded curtly. "Fine. Let us get this sorted out." They walked together to the sheriff's office, Beatrice's mind racing. What new evidence could Henley possibly have manufactured? As they entered the small building, she saw the rancher himself standing near the window, a smug expression on his weathered face. Marcus Henley was in his mid-50s, a successful cattleman who had built his empire through a combination of hard work and ruthless business practices. He wore expensive clothes and an air of entitlement that set Beatrice's teeth on edge. "About time, Morrison," Henley said. "I want this woman arrested immediately." "I will decide who gets arrested and when," the sheriff replied coldly. "Now, what is this evidence you claim to have?" Henley pulled a piece of paper from his vest pocket. "I have a statement from a witness who saw Miss Lawson near my ranch 2 weeks ago, watching my horses from a distance. Clearly she was planning which ones to steal." "That is absurd," Beatrice said. "I have never been anywhere near your ranch." "My stable hand Walter Grimes says otherwise," Henley shot back. Vincent stepped forward. "I have information that contradicts your accusations, Mr. Henley. I was camped near Miss Lawson's boarding house the night your mare was stolen. I saw a man leading a horse toward her property around midnight. Miss Lawson could not have stolen that mare because someone else brought it there." Henley's confident expression flickered. "You are lying to protect her." "I am telling the truth. I will swear to it in court if necessary." "The word of a drifting cowboy against a respected rancher," Henley scoffed. "I think we both know whose testimony will carry more weight." "What about the testimony of multiple witnesses?" Beatrice interjected. "Mrs. Chen heard 2 men behind my property that night. Tom Wilson saw a rider in the alley. Your own ranch hand Pete Dockery overheard you talking about teaching me a lesson." Henley's face flushed red. "How dare you make such accusations? Sheriff, are you going to let her slander me like this?" Sheriff Morrison held up a hand. "Everyone calm down." "Miss Lawson, you said Pete Dockery heard something?" "He heard Mr. Henley discussing a plan to force me to sell my property," Vincent confirmed. "I spoke with Dockery myself last night. Dockery is a drunk and a liar," Henley spat. "You cannot trust a word he says." "Funny how everyone who contradicts your story suddenly becomes unreliable," Vincent observed. The sheriff looked thoughtful. "Mr. Henley, I am going to need to speak with Walter Grimes and Pete Dockery myself. Until I can verify these various claims, I am not arresting anyone." "This is outrageous." Henley's composure was cracking now. "I am a prominent member of this community. My property was stolen, and you are treating me like I am the criminal." "I am treating everyone equally under the law," Morrison said firmly. "If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with the territorial judge when he comes through next month." Henley stared at the sheriff for a long moment, then turned his glare on Beatrice. "You will regret this, Miss Lawson. I always get what I want one way or another." He stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind him. In the silence that followed, Beatrice felt her knees go weak with relief. Vincent's hand found her elbow, steadying her. "Sheriff, I want that threat on record," Vincent said. "Henley just admitted he will do whatever it takes to get Miss Lawson's property." Morrison nodded slowly. "I heard it. Miss Lawson, I am starting to think you might be telling the truth about all this. Give me another day to investigate. I will ride out to Henley's ranch this afternoon and talk to his men." "Thank you, Sheriff," Beatrice managed. They left the office, and Beatrice did not realize how badly she was shaking until they were halfway down the street. Vincent guided her to a bench outside the general store and made her sit down. "Breathe," he said gently. "You are all right." "He threatened me right in front of the sheriff," Beatrice said, her voice trembling. "What is he going to do next?" "Nothing, if we can prove what he did." Vincent crouched down in front of her so they were at eye level. "Listen to me, Beatrice. We are close to breaking this open. Henley is getting desperate, which means he knows his plan is falling apart. We just need to push a little harder." She looked into his eyes and found strength there, a quiet confidence that helped settle her frayed nerves. "How?" "I am going to find Pete Dockery and convince him to make an official statement to the sheriff. If he testifies that he heard Henley planning this, combined with my testimony about seeing someone plant that horse, that should be enough to clear you." "What if Dockery refuses? What if Henley has already gotten to him?" "Then we find another way," Vincent said simply. "I am not giving up on you, Beatrice. Not now, not ever." The words hung in the air between them, meaning more than just the immediate situation. Beatrice felt something warm unfurl in her chest, a feeling she had not experienced in the 3 years since her last suitor had left Alpine to seek his fortune in California. She had convinced herself she was content alone, that running her boarding house was enough to fill her life. But sitting here with Vincent, seeing the determination and care in his eyes, she realized how lonely she had actually been. "Why are you doing all this for me?" she whispered. Vincent's expression softened. "Because when I look at you, I see everything I thought I had lost: courage, integrity, someone worth fighting for." He reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Because in the middle of all this mess, I find myself wanting things I have not wanted in a long time." "What things?" "A reason to stay in one place. A home. Someone to come back to at the end of the day." His thumb traced along her jawline. "Someone like you." Beatrice's breath hitched. They were on a public street in the middle of town, but in that moment the rest of the world seemed to fade away. "Vincent, we barely know each other." "I know," he agreed. "But I would like to change that. After we clear your name, I would like the chance to really know you if you will let me." Before she could answer, a commotion down the street caught their attention. A group of men on horseback were riding hard into town, led by Marcus Henley. They pulled up in front of the sheriff's office, and Beatrice felt her stomach drop when she recognized the rider next to Henley as Walter Grimes, the supposed witness. "We need to hear what they are saying," Vincent said urgently. They hurried toward the sheriff's office, arriving just as Henley and his men dismounted. The rancher's face was triumphant now, all traces of his earlier anger replaced with smug satisfaction. "Sheriff," Henley called out, "I have brought Walter Grimes to give his statement in person. He will tell you exactly what he saw." Grimes was a thin man in his 30s with nervous eyes and fidgeting hands. He looked distinctly uncomfortable as Henley pushed him forward. Sheriff Morrison came out onto the porch, his expression wary. "All right, Mr. Grimes, tell me what you saw." Grimes glanced at Henley, then cleared his throat. 2 weeks ago, I was checking the fence line on the north pasture. I saw a woman watching our horses from the ridge. When she noticed me, she rode off quick. It was Miss Lawson, I am sure of it." "What was she wearing?" Vincent asked suddenly. Grimes blinked. "What? If you saw her clearly enough to identify her face from a distance, you must remember what she was wearing." A dress. A blue dress." "I do not own a blue dress," Beatrice said firmly. "All my dresses are brown, gray, or green, practical colors that do not show dirt." "You could have gotten rid of it," Henley interjected. "Why would I wear my best dress to scout horses for theft?" Beatrice shot back. "That makes no sense." Sheriff Morrison crossed his arms. "Mr. Grimes, how far away was this woman you saw?" maybe 100 yards. And you are certain it was Miss Lawson? You could make out her face clearly at that distance. Grimes hesitated. Well, I mean, I am pretty sure. Pretty sure is not the same as certain, the sheriff said. Was anyone with you who can corroborate your story? No, I was alone. Vincent stepped closer to Grimes, his tall frame suddenly intimidating. Mr. Grimes, did Mr. Henley offer you anything in exchange for this testimony? That is a slanderous accusation, Henley roared. But Grimes had gone pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the morning cool. I saw what I saw, he mumbled, but his voice lacked conviction. You are lying, Vincent said flatly. And you are not very good at it. How much did Henley pay you? Sheriff, I insist you arrest this man for harassment, Henley demanded. Morrison ignored him, studying Grimes carefully. Walter, I have known you for 5 years. You are a decent man far as I can tell. But right now you look guilty as sin. If you are lying to protect your boss, you need to know that makes you an accessory to a crime. You could go to prison. The color drained completely from Grimes's face. He looked at Henley, then at the sheriff, then down at his boots. I did not want to do it, he said quietly. But Mr. Henley said he would fire me and make sure I could not get work anywhere in the county if I did not back him up. You fool, Henley snarled, reaching for Grimes. Sheriff Morrison moved faster, stepping between them. Mr. Henley, I suggest you stay right where you are. Walter, tell me the truth. Did you see Miss Lawson near the ranch 2 weeks ago? Grimes shook his head miserably. No, sir. I never saw her anywhere near our property. Mr. Henley told me what to say. He said it was just a little lie to help him with a business deal. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Beatrice felt Vincent's hand find hers, grounding her as she watched Marcus Henley's carefully constructed scheme collapse around him. That is not all, is it, Walter? Sheriff Morrison said. Tell me about the horse. Grimes looked like he might be sick. Mr. Henley had me take the mare to Miss Lawson's boarding house 3 nights ago. He said to tie her up behind the building and make sure I was not seen. He said he was going to teach Miss Lawson a lesson about refusing his offers. You lying rat. Henley lunged for Grimes again, but Morrison grabbed the rancher's arm and twisted it behind his back with practiced efficiency. Marcus Henley, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit theft, filing false charges, and attempting to suborn perjury. The sheriff snapped handcuffs onto Henley's wrists while the rancher struggled and cursed. You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you use it. The other men who had ridden into town with Henley were backing away, clearly wanting no part of their employer's downfall. Sheriff Morrison called out to his deputy, who came running from inside the office. Take Mr. Henley to a cell and watch him close. Then get Walter Grimes's statement written down and signed. He is going to tell us everything. As the deputy led the still protesting Henley away, Morrison turned to Beatrice. Miss Lawson, I owe you an apology. I should have questioned Henley's story more thoroughly from the start. You were doing your job, Sheriff, Beatrice said, though her voice was shaky. I am just grateful the truth came out. Thanks in large part to Mr. Rourke here, Morrison acknowledged, nodding at Vincent. You pushed in all the right places. Ever consider becoming a lawman again? Vincent shook his head. Those days are behind me, Sheriff, but I appreciate the thought. Morrison glanced between them, a knowing look crossing his face. Well, I expect I will see you both around town then. Miss Lawson, you are free to go. No more check-ins required. They left the sheriff's office in a daze, the morning sun climbing higher in the sky. The street had returned to its normal rhythm, people going about their business, unaware that Beatrice's entire world had just shifted on its axis. It is over, she said wonderingly. I am actually free. You are, Vincent confirmed, and the smile that crossed his face transformed it, making him look younger and less careworn. Beatrice turned to face him fully, her heart pounding. "You saved me. If you had not come forward, if you had not pushed Grimes to confess, I would be in a cell right now waiting for trial." "You saved yourself," Vincent corrected. "You are the one who refused to give up, who challenged the sheriff to investigate properly. I just helped connect the dots." They stood there on the wooden sidewalk, townspeople flowing around them like water around stones. Beatrice felt the weight of the past 3 days lifting, replaced by something lighter, something that felt dangerously close to joy. "What happens now?" she asked. Vincent's expression turned serious. "That depends on you. I meant what I said earlier, Beatrice. I want the chance to court you properly, to see where this thing between us might lead. But I am still a drifter with no permanent job and no real prospects. I cannot offer you much beyond myself." Beatrice stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "You are offering me yourself. That seems like quite a lot to me." "I am serious about staying," Vincent said. "No more running from town to town. If you will have me, I want to make a life here in Alpine. With you." Her breath caught. It was too fast, too sudden. They had known each other for barely 3 days. But somehow, in the midst of crisis and fear, they had formed a connection that felt more real than relationships she had had for years. She thought of the way he had stood by her without question, the way his presence made her feel safe and seen, the way her heart leaped every time their eyes met. "I would like that very much," she whispered. Vincent's face lit up with relief and happiness. He cupped her face in his hands, his calloused thumbs stroking her cheeks. "I am going to court you proper, Beatrice Lawson. Dinners and dances and long talks under the stars. I am going to learn everything there is to know about you. And then, when enough time has passed that no one can say we rushed, I am going to ask you to marry me." Beatrice laughed, feeling giddy and reckless. "What if I say yes right now?" "Then I will tell you to wait anyway, because you deserve to be courted and wooed and treated like the remarkable woman you are." She reached up and pulled his face down to hers, kissing him there on the main street of Alpine with half the town potentially watching. He made a surprised sound against her mouth before wrapping his arms around her waist and kissing her back with a fervor that made her toes curl in her boots. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Beatrice saw Mrs. Patterson watching from the door of the general store with wide eyes. She did not care. Let the whole town talk. She had just been cleared of horse theft and found herself falling in love with a cowboy who had appeared in her life like something out of a dime novel. "Come on," she said, taking Vincent's hand. "I want to show you the boarding house properly. And we should talk about what you might do for work if you are staying in Alpine." Vincent let her lead him down the street, his fingers intertwined with hers. "I am good with horses and decent with carpentry. I can find something." "The boarding house needs repairs," Beatrice mused. "The porch is sagging, and half the shutters are hanging crooked. I have been putting off the work because I could not afford to hire anyone. If you are handy with tools, perhaps we could work out an arrangement. Room and board in exchange for fixing up the place." "I would like that," Vincent said. "Though I should probably get a proper job too. I do not want people thinking I am taking advantage of you." "People are going to think what they want regardless," Beatrice replied. "We might as well give them something actually worth gossiping about." They spent the rest of the day at the boarding house, talking and planning and getting to know each other in the unhurried way that had not been possible during the crisis. Beatrice learned that Vincent had grown up in Missouri, the youngest of 4 brothers. He had learned to ride before he could properly walk, and had always dreamed of adventure in the West. He had been 21 when he became a deputy, full of idealism and naivety. The corruption he had discovered had shattered him, but he was slowly piecing himself back together. Vincent learned that Beatrice had been educated by her mother, a former schoolteacher from Boston who had fallen in love with a Texas rancher and followed him into the wilderness. She had inherited her mother's love of books and her father's stubborn determination. She had turned down 3 marriage proposals over the years, not because the men were unsuitable, but because she had not felt that spark, that sense of rightness that she was supposed to feel. "I feel it with you," she admitted as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "That spark, it terrifies me and thrills me in equal measure." Vincent took her hand, his thumb rubbing circles over her knuckles. "I feel it too, like I have been wandering in the dark for 2 years and suddenly someone lit a lantern." The days turned into weeks, and Vincent settled into life in Alpine with surprising ease. He found work at the livery stable, where his skill with horses quickly made him invaluable. In his spare time, he worked on repairs at the boarding house, his presence becoming so constant that people stopped thinking of him as a stranger and started considering him part of the community. He courted Beatrice exactly as he had promised, with dinners and dances and long evening walks through town. They talked about everything, their pasts and their dreams, their fears and their hopes. He made her laugh with stories from his drifting days. She impressed him with her business acumen and her determination to make the boarding house the best in town. Marcus Henley was tried and convicted of his crimes, sentenced to 5 years in territorial prison. His ranch was sold to pay his legal debts, the land parceled out to smaller homesteaders. Walter Grimes, who had cooperated fully with the investigation, was given a suspended sentence and left Alpine to start over somewhere else. Justice, it seemed, had actually prevailed. 3 months after Vincent had first walked into that sheriff's office and declared his belief in Beatrice's innocence, he took her to the creek where he had been camping the night of the horse theft. The stars were brilliant overhead, the creek burbling softly, the air cool and clear in the way it sometimes got in early autumn. "This is where I first heard the hoofbeats," Vincent said, pointing toward the path that led to the boarding house. "I almost ignored them. Almost just rolled over and went back to sleep." "I am very glad you did not," Beatrice said, leaning against his side. "So am I." He turned to face her, reaching into his pocket. "I know we said we would wait, that we would take our time. But these 3 months have shown me everything I needed to know. You are brilliant and brave and beautiful. You challenge me and comfort me. You make me want to be better than I am, and I do not want to spend another day without knowing you will be mine forever." He dropped to one knee, pulling out a simple gold ring. "Beatrice Lawson, will you marry me?" Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, sweeping her into his arms and spinning her around while she laughed. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, pouring everything he felt into the connection of their lips. "I love you," he said against her mouth. "I have loved you since the moment you told that sheriff he had better investigate properly. You were magnificent." "I love you too," Beatrice replied. "You are the best thing that ever came out of a terrible situation." They were married 6 weeks later in the small church Beatrice's father had helped build. The entire town turned out for the wedding, curious to see the woman who had been falsely accused marry the cowboy who had helped clear her name. Sheriff Morrison gave Beatrice away, a gesture that meant more to her than she could express. Mrs. Chen and her family brought beautiful decorations from the Chinese tradition, adding color and joy to the celebration. Vincent looked devastatingly handsome in his new suit, his hair freshly cut. His eyes locked on Beatrice as she walked down the aisle in her mother's preserved wedding dress. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed her with such tenderness that several people in the congregation wiped away tears. The reception was held at the boarding house, which Vincent had transformed over the past months into a showplace. The porch no longer sagged, the shutters hung straight, and a fresh coat of white paint gleamed in the autumn sunshine. Tables were set up in the yard, laden with food that seemed to appear from every household in town. There was music and dancing and toasts to the happy couple's future. As the celebration wound down and the stars appeared overhead, Vincent and Beatrice stood together on their porch, watching their guests depart. He had his arm around her waist, and she leaned into him, feeling complete in a way she had never experienced before. "Ready to start our life together, Mrs. Rourke?" Vincent asked. "I have been ready since the day you believed in me when no one else did," Beatrice replied. They went inside their home, closing the door on the rest of the world. The boarding house still had 2 guests staying in the upstairs rooms, but Beatrice and Vincent had their own quarters on the ground floor, a space that had once been her father's study, but was now transformed into a cozy bedroom. Vincent carried her over the threshold, a tradition he insisted on observing despite her laughing protests. He set her down gently and cupped her face in his hands. "I am going to spend the rest of my life making you happy," he promised. "Then we are even," Beatrice said, "because you already make me happier than I ever thought possible." Their first night as husband and wife was everything it should be, tender and passionate, awkward in moments and perfect in others. They learned each other's bodies the way they had learned each other's hearts, with patience and care and genuine affection. Life in Alpine settled into a comfortable rhythm. Vincent continued working at the livery while also helping Beatrice run the boarding house. They made a good team, his easygoing nature balancing her fierce determination. The business thrived under their joint management, and within a year, they had saved enough to add another room onto the building. When Beatrice discovered she was pregnant, 14 months after their wedding, Vincent's joy was palpable. He became almost comically protective, insisting she not lift anything heavy or work too hard. She tolerated his hovering with amused patience, knowing it came from love. Their son was born in the spring of 1880, during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and flooded the streets. Dr. Henderson attended the birth, along with Mrs. Chen and 2 other women from town. Vincent paced the hallway outside their bedroom, wearing a path in the floorboards until Sheriff Morrison showed up and forced him to sit down and have a drink. When Dr. Henderson finally emerged and told Vincent he had a healthy baby boy, the new father nearly knocked over a chair in his haste to get to Beatrice's side. She lay exhausted in their bed, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Meet your son," she said softly. Vincent took the baby with shaking hands, staring down at the small face with wonder. "He is perfect. We need to name him," Beatrice reminded him. They had discussed names for months but had not been able to agree on anything. "Thomas," Vincent said suddenly. "After my grandfather, Thomas Rourke." "Thomas Rourke," Beatrice repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Welcome to the world, Tommy." Vincent leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Thank you for him. Thank you for everything." Being parents transformed them in ways both expected and surprising. Vincent discovered reserves of patience he had not known he possessed. Beatrice found that loving someone else more than yourself came naturally when that someone was your child. They took turns walking the floor with Tommy when he cried in the night. They celebrated every milestone. His first smile, his first laugh, the first time he rolled over. The boarding house continued to prosper, helped in part by the railroad that finally did extend to Alpine in 1881, just as Marcus Henley had predicted. But it was Beatrice who benefited from the increased traffic, not the imprisoned rancher. She and Vincent expanded the business, adding a small restaurant that served breakfast to travelers passing through. On their second anniversary, Vincent gave Beatrice a surprise. He had purchased the empty lot next to the boarding house, the one that had once belonged to old Mr. Patterson before he passed away. "I thought we could build a proper house here," Vincent explained. "Something just for us and our family. We can keep running the boarding house, but we would have our own private space too." Beatrice threw her arms around his neck. "That is a wonderful idea." They designed the house together, working with a carpenter from town to bring their vision to life. It was a modest home by the standards of ranchers like Henley had been, but to them it was perfect. 2 stories with a wide porch, a kitchen with modern conveniences, bedrooms enough for the family they hoped to grow. The house was completed in the fall of 1882, and they moved in with 2-year-old Tommy toddling between the rooms and exploring every corner. Vincent carried Beatrice over the threshold again, making her laugh at his insistence on tradition. "I am going to do this every time we move," he informed her. "When we are 80 years old and moving into some cottage for our retirement, I will still carry you over the threshold." "I will hold you to that," Beatrice promised. Their daughter was born in 1883, a squalling bundle with Beatrice's dark hair and Vincent's striking eyes. They named her Sarah, after Beatrice's mother. Tommy was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to help with her care. Vincent taught him to be gentle, guiding the little boy's hands as he touched Sarah's tiny fingers. Life was good. More than good, it was blessed. Vincent had found the home and purpose he had been seeking. Beatrice had built a successful business and a loving family. They were respected in the community, known for their fairness and generosity. When new settlers arrived in Alpine, confused and overwhelmed, Vincent and Beatrice were often the first to offer help and guidance. Sheriff Morrison retired in 1884, and to everyone's surprise, he recommended Vincent as his replacement. The town council approached Vincent with the offer, but he turned it down without hesitation. "I appreciate the faith you have in me," he told them, "but I am done with law enforcement. I found what I was looking for when I found my wife and my family. I do not need a badge to know who I am anymore." Beatrice was proud of him for knowing himself well enough to make that choice. She knew it had not been easy, that part of him would always regret the way his time as a deputy had ended. But he had built something better, something more lasting than a career in law enforcement ever could have been. The years rolled on, marked by the small joys and challenges of family life. Tommy started school and proved to be a quick learner, much to Beatrice's delight. Sarah grew into a spirited child who followed her brother everywhere and drove Vincent to distraction with her fearless climbing of trees and fences. They had a third child in 1886, another boy they named David, who had Vincent's easygoing temperament and Beatrice's stubborn determination. On the 10th anniversary of the day they met, Vincent and Beatrice stood together on the porch of their home, watching their 3 children play in the yard. The boarding house next door was doing better than ever, now managed by a capable woman they had hired to handle the day-to-day operations. Vincent had taken a position as Alpine's official horse trader, using his skills to broker deals between ranchers and the army posts scattered throughout West Texas. Beatrice had recently been elected to the school board, the first woman to hold such a position in Alpine's history. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been?" Beatrice asked, leaning against Vincent's side. "If you had not been camping by that creek, if you had not come forward every day," Vincent admitted. "I think about how close I came to riding past Alpine entirely. How I almost did not get involved because I thought it was not my business." He turned to face her, his hand coming up to cup her cheek in that familiar, beloved gesture. I think about how different my life would have been without you in it, and it terrifies me." "We were meant to find each other," Beatrice said with conviction. "I truly believe that. All the terrible things that happened, the false accusations and the fear, they brought us together. They gave us this." She gestured to the scene before them. Tommy teaching Sarah how to throw a rope, while little David toddled after them on unsteady legs. The mountains rising in the distance, purple and majestic. The town of Alpine spread below, bustling and alive. Their home, filled with love and laughter. Vincent kissed her softly. "I love you, Beatrice Rourke. I have loved you since the moment I saw you standing up to that sheriff, and I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "I love you too," she replied. "My cowboy witness, my unexpected hero, my husband." Tommy came running up to the porch, breathless and excited. "Papa, can you teach me how to saddle a horse? Please." Vincent glanced at Beatrice, who nodded with a smile. "All right, son, let us go to the stable." As Vincent headed off with Tommy, Sarah climbing onto his back for a ride, Beatrice picked up David and settled into the porch swing. She watched her family with a heart so full it felt like it might burst. She thought about the scared woman she had been 10 years ago, accused of a crime she did not commit, facing the loss of everything she held dear. She thought about the cowboy who had appeared out of nowhere, believing in her when the rest of the world saw only guilt, who had stood by her through investigation and accusation, who had helped uncover the truth and restore her name, who had stayed not out of obligation but out of love, choosing her and Alpine and the life they could build together. It had not been easy. They had faced prejudice from some townsfolk who thought Vincent was too much of a drifter, that Beatrice was too independent. They had struggled financially in those early years, working long hours to make the boarding house profitable. They had weathered illness and accidents, the inevitable conflicts that arose in any marriage, the challenges of raising children on the frontier. But through it all, they had each other. That foundation, built on trust and respect and genuine affection, had proven unshakable. They were partners in every sense of the word, facing life's trials together and celebrating its joys as one, as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Vincent returned with the children. They gathered on the porch together, the family complete, and watched the day give way to night. Stars began to appear, those same stars that had shone on the night Vincent proposed, that had witnessed every moment of their journey together. "Tell us the story," Sarah demanded, as she often did. "Tell us about how you and Mama met." Vincent and Beatrice exchanged a smile. They had told this story countless times and would tell it countless more. It was their story, the foundation myth of their family. It began with injustice and fear, but ended with love and triumph. It reminded them that even in the darkest moments, hope could be found in unexpected places. "It started with a stolen horse," Vincent began, his voice taking on the storytelling rhythm the children loved. "Your mother was accused of a crime she did not commit, and the whole town turned against her. But she stood tall and challenged the sheriff to find the truth. And I, just a cowboy passing through, saw her courage and knew I had to help." "Because you loved her," Tommy said confidently. "Not yet," Vincent corrected gently. "At first, I just knew she was innocent and deserved someone in her corner. The love came later, as we worked together to clear her name. I fell in love with her bravery, her intelligence, her refusal to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. And Mama fell in love with Papa because he was handsome," Sarah declared. Beatrice laughed. "He is handsome, but that was not why. I fell in love with him because he saw me, truly saw me, when everyone else looked right through me or assumed the worst. He believed in me when I was starting to doubt myself, and he stayed, even when he could have easily ridden away. "I stayed because I found what I had been searching for," Vincent said, pulling Beatrice close. "A home, a purpose, and the love of an extraordinary woman who made me believe in myself again." The children listened raptly, even though they had heard this story dozens of times before. They never seemed to tire of it, this tale of how their parents met and fell in love in the midst of crisis and fear. It was better than any fairy tale because it was real, because it was theirs. Later, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Vincent and Beatrice sat together in their room. She brushed out her hair while he removed his boots, the comfortable domesticity of a long marriage settling around them like a warm blanket. "You have any regrets?" Beatrice asked suddenly. Vincent looked up, surprised. "About what?" "About settling down here instead of continuing to drift. About marrying me and taking on all the responsibilities that came with it. Sometimes I wonder if you miss the freedom you had before." He stood and came to her, taking the brush from her hand and setting it aside. He turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders, his eyes serious. "Beatrice, listen to me. I have never regretted a single moment of our life together, not one. The freedom I had before was empty. I was running from myself, from my failures, from my fear of getting hurt again. You gave me something so much better than freedom. You gave me purpose, belonging, love. I just want to make sure you are happy," she said softly. "I am happy," he assured her. "Every single day I wake up grateful that I was in the right place at the right time to meet you, that I had the courage to get involved instead of riding away. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Beatrice Rourke. You and our children and this life we built together." She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I am grateful, too, for all of it. Even for Marcus Henley and his schemes, because without them, you might have passed through Alpine without stopping." "I like to think we would have found each other somehow," Vincent mused. "Maybe I would have brought a horse to sell and you would have been at the livery stable. Maybe I would have needed a room at your boarding house. Maybe we would have met at church or at a town dance. Somehow, someway, I believe we were meant to be together." "I believe that too," Beatrice agreed. They went to bed wrapped in each other's arms as they did every night. Outside, the wind whispered through the cottonwood trees. The town of Alpine slept peacefully under the vast Texas sky. And in their home, Vincent and Beatrice Rourke rested in the knowledge that they had found what so many people spent their whole lives searching for: true love, genuine partnership, and a place to call home. The years continued to unfold, bringing new challenges and new joys. Their children grew and thrived, eventually leaving to build lives of their own. Tommy became a veterinarian, using the love of animals his father had instilled in him. Sarah married a carpenter and settled just outside Alpine, giving Vincent and Beatrice their first grandchildren. David followed in his mother's footsteps, becoming a teacher and eventually a school principal. Vincent and Beatrice grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced the losses that came with age, friends passing on, their own bodies slowing down. But they faced it all together, never once regretting the path they had chosen. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the whole town turned out to celebrate. Their children and grandchildren gathered, filling the house with noise and laughter. A portrait was taken of Vincent and Beatrice, sitting side by side in their Sunday best, their hands clasped together. In the photograph, you could see the love that still shone in their eyes, undimmed by the decades. 50 years, Beatrice marveled as they sat together that evening after the guests had departed. "Can you believe it has been 50 years since you walked into that sheriff's office?" "Best 50 years of my life," Vincent said. His voice was rougher now, his hair completely white, his movements slower. But his eyes still held that same warmth, that same devotion. "Mine too," Beatrice agreed. She was 72 now, her dark hair silver, her face lined with wrinkles earned through years of laughter and love. "I would not change a single thing. Not even the part where you were accused of horse theft," Vincent teased. She laughed. "Not even that, because it brought you to me." They sat together in the gathering twilight, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that exceeded their wildest dreams. They had loved deeply and been loved in return. They had raised good children who became good adults. They had contributed to their community and made Alpine a better place. Vincent passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1929, at the age of 76. Beatrice held his hand as he drew his last breath, whispering words of love and gratitude for the life they had shared. She grieved deeply, but found comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the memories they had created, in the knowledge that their love story had been everything it should be. She lived another 5 years, dying quietly in 1934 at the age of 78. Her last words were reported to be Vincent's name, spoken with a smile. She was buried beside him in the Alpine cemetery, under a simple stone that read, "Beatrice Lawson Rourke, beloved wife, mother, and friend." She stood strong. Next to it, Vincent's stone said, "Vincent Rourke, devoted husband, father, and witness to truth." He stood by her. Their children made sure the boarding house was preserved, eventually turning it into a small museum that told the story of Alpine's history. The tale of how Beatrice was falsely accused, and how Vincent helped clear her name became local legend, passed down through generations. It was a story about justice and courage, but more than that, it was a story about love that overcame fear, about two people who found each other at exactly the right moment and chose to build something beautiful together. And if sometimes, on quiet evenings, people walking past the old Rourke house claimed to see two figures sitting together on the porch, holding hands and watching the sunset over the mountains, well, perhaps some love stories are too powerful to be contained by something as simple as death. Perhaps the best ones echo through time, reminding us all that true love, real partnership, and genuine devotion are worth fighting for, worth believing in, and worth celebrating for as long as stories are told and hearts can feel.